Going on another Wednesday night of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club with my always awesome co-hosts here. We've got Kellen from Killing for Company, and we've got Jim from Eihwaz Recordings. Both of these guys are listed in the description, so please go check out what they're doing. And how are you gentlemen doing this evening?
Bracing for this one.
You know, it's funny. I've been listening to this album a lot here in the last couple days, and curious what if Kellen had maybe a change. Because there's definitely. I mean, Jim, we were talking about a minute before he came on that Snake's vocals could be a bit. It's kind of like the King Diamond syndrome. Either you love it or you hate it, and there's not really a lot of in between. And then start listening to some of the music itself. There's a lot of complexity and interesting structures and busy things going on here and there. And it's not a casual listen album. It really isn't now for me, I've heard it 20 million times and I love it. But I don't know. What do you think, Jim? What do you think Kellen's going to say? Let's look into his eyes right now and predict. I don't think it's good. Do you?
I think he's going to hey, man, I wish I could virtually stab you in the neck for all this ear torment you've put me through the last week, Jim.
But Kellen, what you mentioned last week that this is an album that you've heard but can't really connect with, and you want to start talking about it now. What was the process this week? Last minute dread. I got to get into this. Any revelations, or kind of you're straddling the line where you were?
Well, I probably spent more time in a very dedicated fashion listening to this record, right? Like just as a product of wanting to do this episode some level of justice, right? So just a bit of background. Don't know, it would have been back in the early 2000s for me. And when I first came across Voivod, and it was a challenge then, and I sort of shelved the band for a while. And I thought, you know what, that's just not for me. Maybe I'll return to it later. And I want to say it would have been a long time. But get the year right here. So in 2018, when The Wake came back around, I thought, okay, it's been almost 2 decades of metal listening underneath my belt. Like, I'll get back to this band. I probably have, a little bit more patience and understanding. I can properly contextualize this and appreciate it in a way that I could not before. And I had the same sort of initial reaction where it was like, it's just not like whatever. I'm not internalizing it the way I'm supposed to. I think the way I phrase this is, it's a me issue. It's not Voivod. It's I'm trying to be a better man about this, but I just so this time around, for me, it is consistently a band that on like some kind of like, everyone would call it like academic or intellectual level, like I can understand and appreciate them for their contribution. But that part of a record that like gets underneath your skin and like you internalize it and becomes like an important part of you, like I'm just not there with this band. And we'll kind of get into that, potentially later. But I don't know if there's other bands that you have like that and that you listen to where it's like you fundamentally recognize how important they are, but just do not sink in on some internal level. I have that kind of relationship with Voivod, and this record's amazing. But if you're kind of asking me, am I going to love it in the same way that I think I'm sure both of you will speak to? I'm probably on the opposite end of that spectrum where I don't feel the need to, if I see it and it comes on, like I'm not going to turn it off. But if you're asking me like how often I would want to pull it from the shelf and feel like I'm missing some out on this record, like I just don't have that as a part of my constitution, right? Like I just don't have it. So that's my kind of long-winded introduction to how this is going to go for the rest of the evening.
Right on. Oh, cool. No, it'll be good. It'd be good to hear your insight on this for sure. And before we get into that further, we should do a little bit of house cleaning here with the history. Voivod, they formed in 1982 in Jonquière, Quebec, and were influenced by new wave of British heavy metal, hardcore, an early hardcore punk scene, and 70s progressive rock. Their evolution found the early albums containing more of a loose and punk vibe, but as they progressed, their thrash and prog elements further diversified and broadened the possibilities of their unique sound. The original lineup remained intact until the early 90s, where Blackie and Snake departed to be replaced by Eric Forrest. After Piggy's passing in 2005, Daniel Chewy Mongrain joined the band as the gifted musical / spiritual successor to Piggy and remains the creative force behind Voivod today. Voivod have created 15 full-length albums in 40 years, making them an unwavering and very important legacy band. So yeah, let's start off with first impressions. Kellen, let's start with you. You're the man of the hour right now. Let's start with you.
Or on the chopping block. I don't
know. We're kind. Okay. We can be kind.
First impressions about this record and their sound overall. They have a complete the packet, the entire identity of this band, from the album artwork to the lyrical concepts to the outfits, right? What they wore, their instruments, every single piece of this band completely works, right? It's so well presented. So the first impression I always get with them, though, is it has to be the guitar work. For me, it reminds me of noise rock or post punk.
They kind of sound like an Amphetamine Reptile band, the label.
Yeah,
kind of like with Today's Today and bands like that,
right? But I even get, and we're gonna kind of talk about the punk side of this later on. But even I remember hearing Big Black for the first time around, that kind of noise rock guitar.
Yeah. Scraping guitar tone.
Yeah. And it just completely pulls me out of a part of this listening experience that I want to associate with thrash metal. And that is, there's always been this back and forth struggle where I'm trying to go to this band looking for the metal or the thrash metal, and they never completely give it to me. So I always sort of teeter on this precipice of, how do I understand this band? Where should I place them? Trying to sort of have some expectation of where this sound is. And they're so unique. It's difficult for me to sort of, I don't know, to kind of accept them or understand them as what they are. So I never quite get there. But just the immediate impression was everything about this sounds amazing. I don't know if it's a metal record. And I definitely don't listen to it and appreciate it as a thrash record.
Interesting. Okay. Right on.
So, I mean, that's just where I go. And I think part of the reason I probably have had a difficult time with them over the years is I always was trying to get away, because I had more background with punk initially, and I was looking for more and more sort of metal. I think that kind of turned me away from Voivod, where I think if potentially I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. For someone who was into thrash, for example, or was listening to more traditional metal, new wave of British heavy metal, etc., in the early 80s, and you grew up with thrash, I'm sure Voivod was a breath of fresh air. So I'm just kind of interested to see how that experience is, because by the late 80s, I would imagine to some degrees, thrash starts to become a little bit stale with death metal creeping in. And here comes Voivod, and potentially their two best records that is going to be the entirety of this, Alan. It is amazing, and at the same time, I can't gel with it. So, but just in terms of my history with this band, it kind of moves in that direction where I was trying to get away from more and more punk sounds, and I listen to them, and I definitely hear a lot of punk in this.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
right on, Jim.
Well, it's my pick, so obviously, I love this record. And to Kellen's point, yeah, I mean, I was definitely a thrash kid, subscribed to thrash metal, and I would listen to or read the good the reviews and stuff, and the writers back then, Voivod, whatever the hell you pronounce his name. Voivod. Marty loves correcting me on that. And his crew actually, they had great taste, and kind of, they never steered me wrong. So it was through them I discovered Creator and Celtic Frost and stuff like that. But Voivod, this album was on the agenda, and I bought blind buy, bought the tape after reading the review. And yeah, it was really weird, and I knew from the review it was going to be really weird. And to Kellen's point, yeah, very punky, and as a metalhead, I was kind of taken aback by it. But what kind of kept me drawn in was Eihwaz drumming, the double bass. He's a badass drummer.
Yes.
And I love Blackie's bass sound. To this day, it's one of my favorite bass sounds ever. And I think he actually came up with the term blower bass back in '83. But yep. So just it was so weird, and I love sci-fi. I love the way his artwork on the cover. I still do. He's a great artist, and and also just like there's a campiness there that usually I hate in music, but because Voivod is so strange, like like a song about cockroaches just seems right for them. And actually that was on a single, but if you bought the cassette like I did, the cockroaches was on it, but on the vinyl,
CD too. CD had the bonus tracks.
Yeah, but which I was actually disappointed. I didn't know that when I got the vinyl. I was like, where the fuck is cockroaches? But anyway, but yeah, even though it was a difficult listen, I knew there was something special there, and I kind of sat, I liked it right away, but it was like really bizarre and not what I mean, there's nothing like Voivod really even now, and but yeah, to Kellen's point, as a thrash kid, it was something completely different, and I was always seeking like unique sounds, I'd buy as much as I could when I had the money, second and third tier thrash for sure. But I knew something like this when I heard Killing Technology, it was going to stick with me, and it has after all these years.
Yeah, for me back in the day, I can't. The first song I heard off this album was I talk about Camelot music a lot on this channel because that record store that chain was a huge impact on my musical growth. But I bought something. And the guy behind the counter handed me a Camelot / Combat Records sampler. There was no cover to it. It was just a clear tape with a bunch of combat stuff on it. And it had Forgotten in Space by Voivod on it. And that song just stood out like a beacon, man. That song was just so bizarre out there. And this was during an era where, yeah, I was a thrash guy. I was completely devouring anything thrash. But I also had a friend that was also into punk and hardcore. And I was also starting to really enjoy crossover music. So hearing Voivod, they seemed like the end boss of crossover music to me. They seemed like the band that they encompassed, a noise rock feel, a prog feel, a thrash feel, a punk, all of it kind of sandwiched together, wrapped in this sci-fi, but with a sci-fi bow on it. It was so intriguing to me. At that point, I had heard War and Pain, which War and Pain to me sounds like, I mean, I've heard some of their demos as well, and they covered Venom and Merciful Fate songs on their demos. And I hear a lot of Venom on War and Pain, a lot of Venom. There's the sloppy, raw, just real.
There
Yeah,
it is. I don't think it's that interesting for that reason.
yeah, it's definitely different from the rest. Roar was just driving thrash metal.
Roar
Just
is
straight.
great.
It's just from start to finish, just driving, hard driving stuff.
Roar is awesome. Yeah.
Yep, and it was Killing Technology that was them really starting to step into something special, something really different. And I wasn't perplexed by it. I'm like I said, I really devoured that Forgotten in Space song. So when I got the album finally, I was like, holy shit, this is just from start to finish something truly special. No one, I mean, even to this day, there's bands that hint at Voivod worship. And Voivod, I'm sure, had their influences as well. Like what a lot of people say, Die Kreuzen, is one of those bands that influenced Voivod. I don't know. But they still to this day are completely unique. Love it or hate it, no one sounds like them, and that is amazing. They've nurtured this sound for how many years? A long time. 40 years. They've nurtured this sound for 40 years. And Killing Technology was a big transitional album into a much more in-depth, atmospheric, interesting world for me. Jim has a question here. He proposed a question totally on his own. I didn't have to say anything about it. He just
no prompting at all.
No pressure.
No prompting, no pressure. The stream would have been ruined without it, but thankfully he did. Take away the double bass and solos, and Killing Technology comes across as more punk than thrash metal, which is the genre this album was placed in back in '87. Ignoring the first two LPs where they were still developing their sound, can an easy genre tag truly be applied to Killing Technology era Voivod? Kellen.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's kind of be like the theme for this, record. And I guess this band in general. I just would say, for me, I hear it first and foremost as a punk band. I mean, I guess crossover would be an interesting place to sort of begin that conversation. It's just, even then, the guitar work is still like trying to compare it to, Cryptic Slaughter or Accused, something like that. Like, it's a world unto itself. It is so unique, right?
He was kind of a genius. The shit he was playing was awesome. Very
right.
proggy. Very proggy.
But I mean, to even then, like the way we think about prog, I feel it's like, I don't know the best way to describe it. It's like they're sort of deconstructing every point you would think like a thrash or crossover riff was supposed to go somewhere.
There you go. Tim solved the puzzle. He solved the riddle for you.
Coming to my rescue. Okay. Yeah. Like, it's even then, I if you were to try and put this next to bands like that, I still think it's like, it's kind of a disservice to accurately describe what's happening on this record, and what they have to offer. Like we'll get into this later, but like the fact that it's a trio really instrumentally pulling this off, I mean, that's a whole other unique sort of factor. So no, I don't. I have a really difficult time giving a clean genre tag to this band, to this record. And I don't know if that's really like as much of an obstacle as it is like the closest thing for me that it sounds like is punk. And even though like that probably is a poor category to place them in, it'd be the first one I choose. So, and you're saying that was what they were placed in originally, Jim, when this record came out?
Thrash.
They were considered thrash
Okay.
metal, but yeah, that's my question. Is like, I kind of feel like it is mislabeled. You know what I mean? Or it was at the time. I think it was just so different, and thrash was ubiquitous, and they were on Noise, alongside Creator and Celtic Frost and stuff. And I think that it was just easier for them to kind of be thrown in, and they were touring with those bands too and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they sounded nothing like anyone, and it sounds like punk, but it's not punk. It's got some metal attributes, but is it thrash? I mean, even I have trouble, being a fan of theirs, listened to it many, many times over the years, and really being able to say what they are. And I'd say with a lot of bands that kind of pisses me off. It usually means that they're, they may have their heads up their ass from a songwriting point of view, where they can't, they just want to, a lot of times with the progressive stuff, they just kind of want to show off their chops, like, hey, I can play all these genres and I'm shoving them all into one song. Where Voivod, they have a very consistent style, but the style is just utterly unique. So it's, and I think for me, what makes them, not punk, but metal, but, but still somewhere like 50-50 is the fact that their aesthetic is more metal. It's really like their presentation,
Very much.
It's always artwork. It's, kind of like the darkness of the sound and the dissonance of it, like as a whole, like kind of, that intensity of it makes it metal,
For sure.
But what makes it not metal is Snake's voice, his crazy delivery, the sometimes campy lyrics, and even Black Keys bass, which is very distorted and awesome, and that's a huge thing in metal. Well, that was also a thing in hardcore punk as well. And when you see Blackie, like, he looked like a punk, you know what I mean? Like, so it is definitely a challenging, thing to kind of, pigeonhole these guys. But that's why I wanted to ask the question. And I'm glad you guys kind of see it the same, where even as a fan, I struggle with it, but luckily I was able to kind of sidestep that even as a thrash kid, and just like, I wanted to be heavy, and was able to embrace the band regardless, and I'm drinking eggnog also.
Gross. Anyway,
it's got rum in it.
Well, yeah. I agree with you completely. And the fact that, their whole aesthetic from Away's artwork, and, Kellen is right. They really had curated their look, and it's very metal. I mean, even their instruments, Piggy and Blackie both had those custom made, I don't remember the brand name, Legator, I want to say. I don't know if that's right or not, but they had these, completely sci-fi looking instruments they were playing, the spikes, and Snake would come out with the gas mask spraying, fog machine into the crowd and all this shit. There's punk there. The leather and spikes is kind of a punk thing too, a little bit. And it's just, and I just don't care. I mean, I like punk, and I listen to Voivod, and there's such a hybrid of all this stuff, but they, even the way their sound is, so carefully curated. I mean, Blackie's blower bass tone, that, I mean, Jim, I mean, just turning on a pedal, getting a distorted bass sound, you got to get that somehow to cut through the frequencies. You got to get,
it's hard to dial it in.
You got to dial it in and get that just right, so it sits in a mix and it sits live. Because, like, essentially, if you take Snake away, they're a 3-piece. You're right, Kellen. It's a power trio musically. And the way Blackie and Piggy interact off of each other, the way they play, I mean, it becomes even more evident as they progress. Nothing Face is a prime example. You listen to the interplay between the bass and the guitar. They're not playing the same thing, but they're playing off of each other. And it is amazing how it comes together. It's so off kilter and killer. It's so unique. And, the roots of it start on this record for me. And, Piggy's guitar playing very much stooped in the 70s prog stuff, and just the chords he's using. And, just when he takes it up high on the neck, and it sounds like air raid sirens to me. It's so fucking cool. It's so dark and twisted, but somehow it makes sense through this madness. There's actual hooks, and there's actual, reoccurring musical themes that they might be a little off kilter and strange, but it makes sense within the song. And
there's
it's just
catchiness to it, man.
Yeah, there's a total catchiness. And if you're just picking it up for the first time and throwing it on, it's kind of off-putting because you don't know how to take it or where it sits. But repeated listen, and I think Tim was saying he spun it a bunch and it really grew on him a lot. But I mean, where do you classify them? I mean, I've always put them in metal. I mean, it seems like the right fit for me. Thrash, I mean, I think Roar is very much a straight up thrash metal record. very weird still because it's Voivod, but it's so hard driving and unrelenting. That whole album is just
Roar makes sense as a thrash record.
Yeah.
Killing Technology, it gets definitely more punk. But I agree with that. I agree with, and that's probably a big reason why, other than the fact that they were on Noise and they toured with those bands, that they were lumped in with thrash metal. Because when you listen to Roar, I think it is easy to classify that previous album to this as thrash. You can hear Piggy's weirdness start to come through. You can hear him start putting those weird chords in, but like the tempos, the driving beats, like to Marty's point, it's in your face. It's like you can bang your head to the songs on Roar. Where
it's like a bloody knuckle, with teeth stuck in it is what that album feels like, like smashed knuckles. It's just, that album feels like that to me. Exactly.
Have you heard Roar, Kellen? I'm curious.
I haven't. I think so. The two records that I have always been recommended are Killing Technology and Dimension Hatros. So
yep.
That's my favorite one. I love Dimension Hatros.
They go, back and forth. I think most, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're sort of like records that kind of find them not only at their peak, but like exploring their like progressive, you want to call it that, and thrash side, like that intersection. Probably they're most connected in those two records. Like,
I think
that's a fair description.
Most cohesive.
Yeah. Right. Whereas like the later part of their career, they become a bit more progressive.
Dimension Hatros was the transition. I mean, the very first song on that, I mean, it just feels very proggy, and it's so spacious sounding and atmospheric. It's got that warm blanket of prog on it to me. But
okay, well, I hate to be the child talking to his elders about what it was like back in the day, but was this in, like, you talk about them touring, with other metal bands,
Creator,
right? Like
Running Wild.
It's one of those time periods also, because there used to be, correct me if I'm wrong here, major divisions between the metal community and the punk community. Would you say it's fair? Like, it was not always we all got along, right?
No, so, Destruction and Cro-Mags went on tour together, and there was constant fights in the crowd between the punks and the metalheads.
Right. So I'm just curious, like, were they embraced back during this time period by both communities? What was the reception? Do you remember? I'm kind of curious.
I didn't hang out with any punks back then.
I mean, I was in high school. I was in high school, and no internet. I'm lucky I even found out about Voivod. And the only reason why I found out about Voivod, because of my love for Noise International. Anything with the Noise logo on it, I bought. And that was just the way it is. That was my internet. I bought bands on labels that put out good shit. I don't know, reading in hindsight, like that Noise book, Damn the Machine, by Gelke, who's been on the show. Cheers to him, David. They toured, their first tour of the US was with Running Wild and Creator, or Celtic Frost. I don't know, but Running Wild never came back after that tour. They didn't do very well, and Voivod somehow did all right. I think they might have headlined that show. I don't know, but they toured with Creator a bunch, and I had a video or two from when they came through Killing Technology era, a bootleg from Detroit at Blondie's, and it was just, the crowd was going fucking nuts. Absolutely nuts. And Creator too. I had the Creator set too. People were just going fucking bananas, and the place was packed. So I would say I don't know that there was really that much worry about the cross pollination of genres. It was so hard hitting and weird. I think it just scratched that itch that, this young rising crowd of thrash metal fiends were just feeding off that intensity and that energy. And I don't know that the titles maybe made that much difference at that point. What do you think, Jim?
No, I think you're right. I think it harkens back to what I said earlier. I think that the intensity was there, and their history, their associations on the label, and all that. I think it didn't matter. I mean, I like, even when I listen to, like, I like post metal, so I like ISIS, and I have a hard time really saying that they're metal. There's definitely metal things about them, but they're a lot more like Neurosis, which I don't really call them metal either. But there's some metal in it. So, but having said that, I like all those bands. You know what I mean? So I do think that if you can, it is possible to be very heavy and to maybe if you're not like you fully have the metal garb on, you can play with other bands if you've got that same level of attack to your music, and Voivod definitely has, especially on this album, a level of attack that I think they could sit on the stage, with those other bands, and it didn't seem like out of place, Now, if it was like one of their later albums, I would say, yeah, it would have been really out of place. I actually saw them in Atlanta at the Roxy playing with some metal bands. This was right before Snake quit, and it was really weird. It was it just didn't. They didn't play enough to mention Hatros.
I saw them on Nothing Face tour with Faith No More and Soundgarden, and that couldn't. I mean, cheers to them for picking up tours that maybe weren't safe for them. You know what I mean? And Faith No More were whatever. They were rising. Their videos were just starting to break on MTV. Soundgarden completely crushed and destroyed. They were amazing. Everybody, and Voivod was the headliner. It was for the Nothing Face, which is supposedly their biggest commercial success, is that album. 90% of the crowd left after Soundgarden, and Voivod played in front of 20, 30 people maybe. And I was there for Voivod, and of course Soundgarden blew me away because they were fucking awesome. They were really, really good. But Voivod were still amazing, and they played great, and they sounded great, but just it seemed like people didn't give a shit. Just the wrong crowd. It was just the wrong bill for them.
Yeah.
So maybe they just, and even now they'll still tour with bands that maybe aren't exactly them. But again, what are they exactly?
What are they?
Yeah. Where do you put them?
And I think that may be the downside of being, when you get to that level of just like utter uniqueness, it's hard for you to, it's hard for the people that, that aren't already into your stuff to buy into it, from the stage if they're there to see someone else. And it just may be a price that they're paying, but I don't know. Everything has its positives and negatives. So that's the anti-silver lining of being Voivod.
Right. Exactly. And I'm sure they're used to that too. I'm sure they're just, they take it for what it is and realize that the music makes complete sense to them, but they probably realize that doing unique things musically, and especially in the metal community, is a hard sell. I mean, unique bands, typically you start whittling down your fan base. A lot of people love Amon Amarth or whatever. And then, Cynic, there's some rabid fans that love Cynic, but it's not very many, it's just, you start chopping them down. But let's discuss the musicality and composition of Killing Technology. What do you think, Kellen?
Really unique guitar structure. And I would drive home the point that, like, I never thought listening to this that this would be just a one guitar band. Like, there is enough, whatever the bass to me drifts up into that like gap, to where it just sounded like there was a really solid rhythm section going on. But he spends so much time on this like high end sort of scathing, grating like transition, when I was be looking for that sort of palm muted chug, and he never stays there very long. A riff will go there for a little bit, and then it'll ride up into something abrasive. And so it doesn't give me that kind of traditional metal guitar stuff, which I never was completely at home with.
Right. Oh, it's kind of unsettling. Like I said, it's like an air raid siren, or just it's really tense. It really breeds in intensity.
And Jim mentioned in his question what was always interesting in terms of as a player, because you'd get like these moments where that sort of like air raid siren thing is going on, and he will flip the switch into a bit more of like a traditional sort of metal lead. There's a solo, and I'm like, that was there the entire fucking time, like, and it's so how calculated of a decision he made as a guitarist to stick to this kind of style, like in terms of what was in that sort of well of talent he could have played, but he took a very concerted effort. And we've talked a little bit about the vocals. It has that like talking conversational punk delivery, right? Like he doesn't sort of over dramatically sort of present himself as a vocalist. But that totally ties in with, you know, the rest of what the band is going for, in terms of having this punk sound. The drums, however, I have to say, like between the drums and the bass work, like you get a chance every once in a while where Piggy will like just take a back seat and Blackie will step into the light and you can see just exactly what he's got going on as a bassist. The drums the entire time I was amazed with. Like for me, it's not just the double bass. There's like moments where he's all over the toms, like in the lead track, that the song sort of quiets and you can hear him rolling through the toms as the track tends to drift out for a moment. Like, so great fills. Like he's got a lot of, you know, talent as drummer. It's a great thrash drummer. But to me, the song structure, they're to call them prog, I think is even like, I think is a misnomer or is a miscalculate. Like that's not what you would want to associate. Like I can get someone who's really into prog, you know, I could pass them potentially something like Watchtower or Corner, and it would make more sense than I think giving them a Voivod record. So wild songs, all of it ties together with this theme, right, that they have going as this like sci-fi, dystopian, futuristic, which is totally part of thrash. But they flipped it on its head to do something completely like cyberpunk with it. So I have nothing but like I'm gushing praise here for a record that I don't like, right? but like I can't, like that part of me listening to it, I cannot deny those elements, right? Like it is impossible for me to listen to this record and strip away or diminish how talented they are and how well presented this record is. So I know like I'm disqualifying potentially everything I'm saying by like just not being into the record. But
it's one of those things where you listen to it as a person that, you know, listens to a lot of music like yourself and really devours it. You can listen to it and realize it doesn't suck. You realize that it's quite good. It's just that you can't wrap your head around whether it's not meeting an expectation that you have in your head of what you think it should be, which is kind of in a way kind of what it sounds like to me a little bit. This because you even said yourself, you're coming from a place of punk. You used to listen to a lot of punk and you wanted more metal. It seems like a band like Voivod would scratch every itch. It's just what is it? It's just not what you were expecting when you first heard it. I don't know. I'm just trying to swim around and find what it is. You know?
Do you think like you'll be reintroduced to this record later on, and like maybe I've grown as a person, I've matured.
Oh, I get it now. The lights. I mean, I've done that. I've said shit sucks before, and then I'm like dancing around, listening to it, like I like this now. What's wrong with me? You know, it makes no sense. Yeah, Jim, how about you? Did you get everything out you wanted to say there? I kind of jumped in your shit a little bit.
No,
but
it's all good. It's all good. Okay. I bounced out. I need to make an exit and pass this on to Jim so he can save me here.
Musicality and composition.
Well, let me just say a little bit about what Kelvin was saying first. I completely get it. I mean, there's plenty of bands out there that I respect, but don't like their music. But you know, but you can, especially when you have been into, metal or any music for a long period of time, and you really start to understand it. You understand what good composition is. You understand what, creativity is, and that's what this band has in droves. But just because there is, creativity, just because there is quality musicianship doesn't mean that what they are generating is going to resonate with you. And so that's what you do is you say, hey, I respect this, but it's not for me, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I think that, as a failed musician myself, not that they're failed, but I was, I would say that I would rather someone say, hey man, I'm not into what you guys do, but I see like, your energy and your drive and your creativity, and I think you're good at what you do. I'd rather someone say that to me than walk at me and say, hey man, good show, and not mean it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'd rather someone tell me that they respect what I do, even if they're not and they're not into it, than to say, hey man, that was cool, good times, when they're in the back of their mind, they're thinking it sucks. You know what I mean? So I think that any band like Voivod, that strives hard to be 100% who they are, without worrying about fitting into any kind of, descriptor, would appreciate, that perspective that you have, so. All right, so moving on to Musicality. Obviously, again, I picked the record. I think it's awesome. You can definitely hear when you listen to early Voivod leading up to this third record. To me, this is where Voivod came alive, was Killing Technology. Piggy was just completely a badass guitar player by now. And by badass, I don't mean Yngwie. By badass, I mean like compositionally, completely original. It's I think someone in the comments said like, jazz meets like Venom and Motorhead. I mean, that's a great way to explain, his style of playing. It's like really kind of acid jazzy, but with these like tenets of like early 80s British metal in there. But it's also interesting, sidebar is to say that I love Motorhead, but I also don't know whether is punk and metal. I don't really think they're they are either genre either. You know what I mean? I think Motorhead's just Motorhead. And so I think it kind of makes sense that, sort of a bastard child of that is a jazz influenced guitar player like Piggy, because he ended up creating something like Lemmy did that's just, utterly unique. So in terms of sound, but I think that, not only were they growing as players, Eihwaz drumming is excellent on the record. Blackie's bass playing is super interesting, and he doesn't follow the guitars. He's always doing something interesting. The one area of the band that I don't think was like a lot of like from a technical perspective, super interesting was Snake. You know what I mean? Snake just kind of like like yodels and barks and tells stories and everything, and a very kind of a punk sort of a almost.
He does hit melodic moments though. He does find melodic strands he grabs onto.
You gotta see, I'm getting there though. You gotta give me a second. Having said that though, Snake's delivery is also what makes Voivod unique and is integral to this band. Because even though he delivers all that punk attitude with a little bit of a metal edge and with a heavy Montreal accent,
yeah,
he's still very understandable, and the way he structures his choruses and his lyrics, they're easy to remember, they're easy to sing along with. I mean, when I joined the stream tonight, like Marty was going tornado and I was like, yes, that was so fucking amazing, because that is what I do every time I listen to this record. I'm going tornado, I'm going Killing Technology, I'm singing along with every song, your mind's running slow, I mean, all of that, it stays in my head, so yeah, this guy is he's not, doing, Blind Guardian theatrics, as much as I love that, you know what I mean? He's not James LaBrie from Dream Theater or whatever, but he's catchy and he's memorable and he's unique. And so I couldn't imagine anyone, and that's one of the reasons I didn't listen to Voivod when he left for a while. I can't imagine anybody else staying on the front of that stage, you know what I mean? So he's, he's just as important to Voivod, musically, as the other three are. This to me is like, we got the classic Motorhead, with Filthy and Eddie and Lemmy. This is the classic Voivod lineup with me, with Blackie, Snake, Away, and Piggy. It's just awesome.
Yeah. All right. For me, musicality and composition, it is so ambitious, and it sounds like a band really excited to be working within this more elevated, enlightened musical palette. Because like I said, War and Pain, I love it. It's a lot of character and charm, but it's sloppy. Roar is just hard driving thrash attack. And this here is so much more advanced and interesting and engaging. And it's just, if you want to sit and try to pick it apart and process it, it's easier for some than others. And, I'm not going to say when I got this, I didn't work at it, because it feels almost a bit alienating until the lines start making sense. And little vocal things that Snake does in the songs, like Jim mentioned, that it brings you into the song. And in spite of, the guitar bass interplay and, interesting changes in the song structures, they always come back around to, it's still a very musical progression that they're writing. They, their hooks are bizarre, but they're hooks nonetheless. And they're repeated. And the song has, even though it might go off on strange tangents or a really super killer solo that does really weird things over a riff, this still comes back around to the heart of the song, which is, key songwriting elements. These guys just seem really on fire here to me. They seem very hungry to continue. They seem like they were loving being Voivod. I mean, you have to keep in mind too, they were kind of not influenced by a scene. Whereas like Germany, a lot of bands from like thrash bands from the era, yeah, there were thrash bands that had their own sound, but there was something about them that was, they shared common elements. These guys are up in the northern part of Quebec in some, weird mining town or chemical plant town or whatever. And they seem like they were kind of outside of this realm of influence, and it wasn't until they were flying in to Germany to get the album recorded and getting underneath the watchful eye of Harris Johns, who was kind of like the Noise International, like the guy, I can't remember his name. The Slagle would always have this guy record all the Metal Blade bands. Harris Johns was the same to Noise as that guy was to Metal Blade. I can't remember his name right now, but I think their location kind of isolated them from taking on any other influence from scenes. Like the Toronto scene, there was a bit of the Canadian bands are weird, man. They just like Sacrifice didn't sound like Razor, so I guess, maybe it's just Canadians are they avoid influence maybe from each other. It's weird. But anyway, I don't know what I'm saying here, other than the fact that I think the album is composed very intelligently. I think it sounds very fresh and new and like a band that's very excited to be doing what they're doing. And let's talk about production next. But this album was recorded at the Music Lab by Harris Johns from November 27th to December 14th, 1986, which makes this almost 36 years old to the date. We're getting damn close to it being an anniversary for that as well. But yeah, what did you think of the production, Kellen?
The production is sensational. I really, really dug the production on this record. And then just like what an interesting like set of, musicians to play with too, right? Like at some level, you've got someone who's doing a lot of the German thrash scene and Voivod shows up to the set. Like it's got to be in just like curveball you have to deal with, I'm sure. But yeah, I everything about this record, like they nail. If this guitar work was muted or to some degree lost its sort of edge or piercing sort of effect, I'm sure to some level the identity of this band would be compromised. So the guitar work sounds great. When it needs to be punishing and in your face, it's there for you. When it needs to drop back and do something a little bit more sort of middle, it's awesome. I guess the vocals aren't as prominent in the mix, but I don't think it's necessarily the centerpiece of the record. So, and I was never distracted by the fact that they're not sort of like elevated. I think he's kind of going through the motions with the band. I don't necessarily see him as like a center vocalist who's dominating the sort of presence. So I didn't feel at any point like it was a compromise. I was losing something. Just because it's to me much more of like a guitarist first band. But the bass production, I can't get past like the sound of his playing. And I'm still, when I listen to it, I'm continually impressed by this is not a 4-piece. There's something about that bass work that drifts whatever, especially for a guitarist who's spending so much time like on the top end of that fretboard. Like you would think that there would be this gulf that develops sonically, But I never felt that happening, right? Like either it's busy enough that it distracts me from paying attention to it, or it's so punishing that I don't get a chance to peer into the mix. But whatever it is, I never feel like it is compromised. Like that bass sort of bleeds into that sort of separating whatever frequency range, if you want to call it. So that's awesome. I continually impressed with the bass work and the production that sort of lends itself to that kind of playing. And the drums, the drum sound is amazing as well. Once again, I know I'm dissing on this record, but the production,
you're not really though. You're not
right.
Really.
The production is, nothing bad about the production for this record. So, yeah, all good here. So I was super pleased with it.
Right on. Okay, Jim, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, I don't know what the hell. Yeah, I actually remember the very first time I played this cassette, and I was totally taken in with all you're in a spaceship and you hear like the blips and everything, and I was just kind of like just locked in, like when is it coming? And it takes a long time to get there, and usually that kind of shit pisses me off. I'm not a big fan of long intros, but in this case, like it really did carry me into the album. It got me ready for it, and as soon as you hear that robot vocoder voice, "We are connected," I was like, oh my God, this is badass. And then you hear, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna kick ass. And then Piggy's like, wah, 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 wah. I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Is this Dead Kennedy? He's like,
yeah, it's Dead Kennedy, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, we just went from like, creepy sci-fi, badass drums that kind of had the, that sort of like, memorable Tom riff like Hell Awaits, I mean? It was just, not like Hell Awaits in it wasn't in terms of its memorability only, but then you go and then suddenly the guitars are really high, so it was super, like, whoa, a little off-putting at first, but I kept giving it a chance, and of course, I loved it. But having said that, I do think the production is, perfect for its time. This is, a great example of, 80s. Would you call this extreme metal? I don't know. Whatever the hell this is, a noise band. I mean, it's a great production, for a noise band, and like they're talking to comments, Bill Matoyer and everything. So I think everything is balanced really, really well. Even though Snake's vocals, you can always hear them. They're not, and even though he doesn't give a shit about key or anything like that, he's just doing his own thing. There's a great balance between all the instruments, and I can hear everything. If I want to like zero in on something, whether it's Piggy or Blackie or Snake or Away, I can always easily, kind of in my mind tune out the other instruments and pick it up. And it's so hard to do that with any band, or any album. And so whenever you can do that, I'm super appreciative of that. It's really hard to, get that separation. And that's not, you want every band to be separate like that. I mean, if you're listening to some really thick Funeral Doom, you don't want to, you don't want it to be so separated that it takes you out of the darkness, but in this case, that separation is nice. We keep coming back to the theme about space. Marty mentioned, like, on Dimension Hatros, that first riff down a little, there's a lot of space around that, progressive riff, but their themes are about space, so it's like, it's thematically and musically and production wise, it's always about space and using it effectively. And I think this is a perfect example of that, because, all the instruments are there, they have, gravitas, if I can use such a word, but at the same time, there is space between each of the instruments there, and the odd thing is, it's like it's the connective fiber of Voivod's sound, especially on this record. So I definitely wouldn't change a thing. I know it's kind of a cliche by now. I always say that when I'm talking about older records, but and I know that I'm not gonna.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and maybe it's true that that's just part of nostalgia. I mean, but I don't know. I think that any tweak in the EQ of anything, or any bump up of any individual instrument on this record, would have detracted from its overall effect. So I think that they really nailed it in, and you know, the only album in their discography that I think comes close in terms of like perfecting their production is Dimension Hatros. Dimension Hatros, you know, took it up a notch. It really got even tighter
Full.
and stronger on that one.
Good full spacey sound, yeah, atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, I really don't know what more I could add to both of what you guys said, because it's all 100%. I'm on the same page. And Harris Johns, I always loved his production style. It gave each band, it had kind of a unifying sound that gave noise its, you know, the noise house type of sound, but it allowed each band to be themselves. But he obviously was using the same board on everybody. He had the same kind of production techniques, but on this record, there is no matter what you do, Voivod's going to sound like Voivod. And he just happened to capture, and the separation, like you said, is really fantastic. And Kellen, you mentioned you don't see how, you know, Piggy's making all this noise super high up on the neck. That's probably intentional, because he knows all of the frequencies that Blackie's playing lower, doing different shit on. If he's doing the same thing, it's going to become very nebulous and very much stepping on what he's doing. So he's being a true player, giving him his space to do what he wants to do creatively, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do creatively, and together we're going to write this song that's not going to sound like anybody else. And it's kind of like an atypical way of approaching a song or writing a song like that. But they knew that just shows me how planned out from their art aesthetic all the way to their visual aesthetic, all the way to their sonic aesthetic. They knew what they had it planned out. They knew what they were. They weren't like anybody else. And I think it's exceptional. And the production's great. Sometimes you listen, and you know, like we did Terrible Certainty, you know, some months back, and that record sounds pretty good too, but it's kind of the clunky in between record to me. That's a very transitional record. This one here, for being a very transitional record from Roar to Dimension Hatros, it doesn't sound clunky. It seems like a new beginning for them, a new breath of life. And it's a great snapshot in time. And I agree, Jim, I wouldn't fuck with it. And, you know, even you hear that it's such an in vogue thing to do, to remix and remaster an album. Don't fuck with it, man. Like, there's some, like this album you don't want to fuck with. You don't want to fuck with Don't Break the Oath. I mean, there's some albums that you don't want to fuck with. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. And that's not coming from an old guy thing. That's just truth. That's just truth. And I agree. Don't fuck with it. Next up, least favorite songs. Kellen.
So, favorite song. If I have to pick the opening track, can we just talk about like that "We Are Connected" moment on this record?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I would listen to it, it feels like a threat. Like,
you're not the boss of me, Voivod.
Don't connect me to Voivod. No.
Stupid album that I've said I've loved in a lot of ways, but I don't. Stupid Voivod.
Right.
Anyway,
but I mean, in terms of like this role of I every single time I hear it,
you know, it's funny because the Voivod goes through and destroys worlds. So maybe it is a threat. We are connected. You're going to be destroyed now.
Yes, like barring my like completely off the wall whatever interpretation of this record, like I think intentionally there's something about like the theme of this record when you hear that, meaning like it just felt to me initially like, yes, we are going to go on this journey of technology getting involved with humanity that seems like in the implicit relationship is problematic, right? Like, and I don't know, they nail that, and we are like from the first moments of this record, and the fact that they're able to deliver that with something so simple, purely based on the subtext, like picking up the album artwork, like the album title, any kind of atmosphere that initially you're exposed to in those early moments, like it just, for me, I kept on listening to that opening track and thinking like they knew what they were doing in terms of trying to articulate the themes of this record. from the beginning, right? Like there's something in that moment that I think is special. So
Mm.
I know people like the chat in the beginning was all like talking about, we are connected, like jokingly, whatever. But I think there is something to that. Like there's a meaning and purpose by beginning the record with that kind of statement. So, but what goes into that is I feel like that sets the stage. Every single time I heard that song, giving it repeated plays this past week, I heard it and I was like, in the like 7.5 minutes this song goes through, you are either on board with the title track that begins this, or you're probably not going to be, happy with what follows. So it was
looking for the escape pod.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really dug that track. There's two others, I guess, that would be Forgotten in Space.
Great song.
I really dig that track purely because of the bass playing. I do think there are some moments on that song where you do hear the bass a bit more in the mix. And the next one is the name Ravenous Medicine. Have you
seen the video for it? Because it's
my
really
god,
funny.
yes.
It's so lo-fi, it's so low budget.
Yeah, like I don't know if that was meant as like in jest or if they were serious and that was just their budget for making that video. But like I also do think the sort of key riff to that song is probably one of the thrashier moments on this record. And I don't know that like that sort of riff. Like immediately I was like, okay, where I'm at home, I'm comfortable here, right? But that lasts, how long before they throw back into something different. So but those were like my favorite moments on this track, or this album, I should say.
Jim.
I gotta go with the title track. It's a perfect introduction to what's coming, and it's completely emblematic of who Voivod is from beginning to end, from the lyrical content to the transitions. There's just a lot of power in the song. I think there's a reason why the album is titled Killing Technology. I mean that song is just it's a crusher. I also really love I like them all, but it's Forgotten in Space. That definitely that muted verse riff is one of the heaviest riffs on the album, and I like in the middle of that song there's that almost like from the movie Psycho, that and but then Blackie comes in with that bass and like makes this crazy high shit sound heavy, Blackie really turning
makes
around.
it very really fucking menacing. It's very menacing.
He makes it very menacing. That's a perfect way to put it, Mario. I completely agree. And Order of the Blackguards actually has about a minute and a half in. It has a really fast section. I mean, they are hauling ass for anything in 87. If you go back and you listen to that, it's going to sound Black Deathy, just from a musical standpoint, for like about a minute and a half in, and it's like for like another minute and a half, they're hauling ass, and it just sounds really dark and eerie. So I really like that song for that reason. And also I like the beginning where, it almost sounds like, Snake is drunk and he keeps going, your mind's running slow, your mind's running slow. And so I really get a kick out of that. So those are definitely my favorites. I would say Killing Technology, Order of the Blackguards, and Forgotten in Space. Though I gotta say, man, I love Tornado. It's so silly, man. It just makes me happy. You know what I mean? That's the kind of song I could be like, sitting out in the backyard by the pool, just like pissing off my neighbors. Tornado. So I love that shit. And this is just an aside, but I have to bring it up. Again, I bought the cassette, so I had the single that I didn't know was a separate album. It had Cockroaches and Too Scared to Scream on it, both of which aren't available on the vinyl, which sucks.
Nope.
But I thought they were part of the record. So I always listen to this album in the context of Cockroaches, and that fucking song is amazing. There's this. It's
got the most rock in it. It's a lot of rock in that.
It's the most rock, man. It begins like this like bizarro world interpretation of Hot for Teacher. Like Piggy's even do this like crazy like like out of key finger tapping at the beginning, and then the drums come in like an off time Hot for Teacher, and then they start talking about cockroaches.
Their food is
then-
plastic coats and boots. I always like that line in that.
Dude, and my favorite is, "There's only one solution: eat them,
Eat
one
them
by
one by one.
Seek out cockroaches. I highly recommend it.
All right. Well, you kind of nailed my favorites. I mean, my favorite song on the album is Order of the Blackguard. And the line, the books are burning hard, your mind's running slow, your mind's running slow. Just that whole progression in there where the bass and the guitar link up. It's like so dark and menacing. It's just a very dark vibe to that song. And, you know, Piggy still throws in these little like trill things he throws in there. It gives it that rock push. As it's dark, there's like a little bit of light peeking out from underneath the riff. It's so cool. And I think that song is just a very well put together, again, very dark kind of. There's not a lot of really super strange asides on that. It's just very unified, dark pushing song. Forgotten Space, man, there's some riffs in there. It just sounds like I get a visual impression in my head of like a broken robot trying to move. It's kind of like how the riff is. It's just very augmented and weird, kind of nightmarish riff. It's so fucking cool. And you're right, Jim, that whole that whole part in there with the guitar, and so good, man. So unique and heavy and menacing sounding. There's no songs on here that I dislike. And the song Too Scared to Scream, I believe that's on the that was on the Cockroaches EP, right? I love that song too. Really, really strange quirkiness to that song too. But Cockroaches is just a silly rocker. You know, they end they on the tape and on the CD, I think that's the last song on it. It's kind of a funny way to end it's a cool ripping song, but it's got a little bit of fun to it. But totally great. I have no dislikes. From the intro to the end, I love it. Great. So let's go with Judgment. Final thoughts. Poor Kellen. He's been praising this record for an hour and 6 minutes, and now it's time for where the rubber meets the road.
He's picking up Mjolnir, man. He's picking up the hammer.
Yeah.
I don't like it, and I don't know why.
Pretty much. That is my just see Marty for my final conclusion.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, for as much as I have praised this record, I don't know, like the next time I'm outside of potentially someone trying to broach the subject as to why I should care about this record, what's wrong with me for not loving it.
I get it. Yeah, it's
sure.
Different, man.
Can I say, for everyone who is a massive Voivod fan, I have yet to meet someone who's like, I don't understand why this would be challenging. Like everyone seems to be like, I get it, you know. So
yeah,
it's an absolute classic record that I have no intention to listen to or pull off the shelf anytime soon. And that's I guess how I feel about it. But I mean, it's at some like level, I don't know if you've got to these points in your collection where you feel like as purely as chronicling this moment in metal history, I need to have this in my collection. And that's probably where I will land with some of Voivod's records. Is I will know that somewhere down the line there's a possibility, a glimmer of Voivod hope, where I will put aside my maple syrup and pull my.
You go to grab maple syrup. You're like, oh, what's this album doing back here?
Yes,
I forgot it was here. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, there's Killing Technology, Dimension Hatros, right?
Yeah.
And I will give it a spin, and maybe it'll be, you know, until that time comes, I'm gonna let this one pass. So see the other hour where I talk about all the amazing things about this record, and don't listen to my final thoughts here. But I guess I don't.
Asterisk, but
this is the best album I ever hated. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There you go.
All right, Jim.
Yeah. No surprise. I love this record. Super happy to have it on vinyl. I had the cassette and lost it. I did that. I don't know if you guys ever done anything like that, but I put my tapes. This is a long time ago, on top of my car and drove off, and I lost.
I've done that to a
tapes
cell
that way.
phone a couple times.
It was. I was basically depressed for like 4 days. It was horrible. But anyway, so when the re-release, came out on, because the vinyl's, original price is super expensive. I was super happy.
So the re-release itself doesn't have the 2 bonus songs on it?
The re-release does not have the bonus tracks.
Interesting.
Man.
Okay.
And I was like, what the fuck? But that's when I found out the hard way that it was only on the cassette. I always thought that those
the CD too. The CD too.
Yeah, CD. But I didn't have the CD. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, I love this record. It still stands up today in terms of its uniqueness. There's nothing like it. It is a challenge, as we've alluded to many times. So you definitely, if you've been listening to Morbid Angel or fucking Emperor all day, you're not going to suddenly segue into Voivod unless you're Marty and I. I mean, you got to be in kind of an interesting headspace, to be in the mood for this record. But ultimately, I think it's rewarding, because there's a lot to give there underneath all the weirdness. I think that it fills a gap for something that's for the unexpectedness that I like to have in music. Not all the time, but sometimes I do, and Voivod kind of scratches that itch for me. So yeah, for me, this is a 10, honestly.
All right. Yeah, I think he's summed it up pretty nicely. The album is a challenge, and not all challenging albums have a good payoff. There's a lot of records in my collection that are a challenge, and I guess I see even more where Kellen's coming from. Like, Deathspell Omega. Someone kept mentioning Deathspell Omega. I like some Deathspell, and I always think they're super talented, but the music is so complex and weird and from a different fucking dimension. It's hard to listen to it. Plus the whole racism thing too. But I could see Voivod, being that same thing to someone else. But, coming from a spot where I started off early with Voivod, it just seemed to work for me. So I guess it's all where, you come in on. And I know, like Kellen, like Deathspell Omega, that sits a lot better with you, even though it is super complex. It's like advanced algebra or advanced calculus music at times. But this album is a great transition record for this band. It set them on a path to much better things. And all bands have to start somewhere, and this is their evolution out of those early, which I love too. Don't get me wrong. I love that stuff as well, but this is a very mature, well-considered, thought out. Everything seems like it had its place and it was planned for. And I really respect that, as a songwriter myself, and just coming at it with a fresh idea and new thought. I think it's just, for that alone, it's an exceptional release. The fact that the songs hold up for me after all these years, I could put it on. I listened to it 5 times today. I've heard this album a million times in my life. It's just, and it is so well written that the hooks are they're just complex enough that they don't lose sight of being memorable, and it allows you to listen to it for years to come and not get tired of it, if that makes any sense. But this is a great record. I mean, Dimension Hatros of the early era is my favorite. I would give this a 9.5 and Dimension a 10. Other than the Batman cover on Dimension Hatros, I always hated that. But I don't know. I love this record. I love this band. They've gone through some spots over their era that I didn't love. But any band is going to go through that that's been together for 40 fucking years. I mean, they can't all be winners. They just can't. A legacy band, whether it's Maiden, whether it's Metallica, whether it's Slayer, Creator, they all put out shit at one point. Still within their style, but I mean, Voivod, though, they may have put out records I didn't care for, but it still sounded like Voivod, which is very, very admirable, very cool. And despite all of the different, genres and trends come and go, they maintain their sense of self, which I think is excellent as well. But yeah, I guess that's it. And thank you guys for doing this. Jim, thanks for picking it. And I'm picking for next week. And the thing we talked about, I'm going to wait. We have some setup to do for that one. But this is the first for this show. I think I can't read it. I think it's Grim Night Records. The guy that runs this sent me this for us to review. So we're going to do it. This is Frontal Assault with Hazardous to All. I haven't even taken it out of the shrink wrap yet. Apparently, this is a high school band. It looks like it's a thrashy black metal type of thing. So I guess they're high school-ish kids.
Okay.
I mean, this guy over here, he don't look like he's old enough to drive yet. But he's trying to get that stash going for sure. But no, we're going to be checking out Frontal Assault, Hazardous to All next week.
Oh.
It's new for me too, so it'll be fun. We'll all be on the same footing on this one. So that's it. And thank you, gentlemen, as always. And thank you, everybody that was watching. We almost hit 50. We may have hit 50 at one point. I don't know. But it was good to have all you folks with us and every week. And we'll be back on Friday. We don't quite know what's going on yet Friday, but we'll get it figured out and sorted out for you guys. Anybody have anything to add before we jump?
Kellen, I want you to check out Roar, man. You haven't heard Roar, but you gotta.
Okay.
It's definitely, that one's thrash. You know what I mean? So there might be something there for you. So
okay, well we'll keep a running tab on Kellen's Voivod love sort of threshold. See how well that progresses through the year.
Yeah.
So
wait a few weeks to heal from killing technology.
Okay.
So do you have Dimension Hatros as well? You bought that record?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. Anyway, everybody, we'll see you around Friday and see you guys next week. Cheers.